Welcome to 5 Points Blues presentation of Back to the Basics. Everything you wanted to know about Cowboys football, but were too afraid to ask. Here are your hosts, Nikki Harrison and Christy Scales.
Hello. Welcome to Back to the Basics. Everything you wanted to know about Cowboys football, but were too afraid to ask. I'm Nikki Harrison here with Christy Scales. Welcome back. You've been on vacation.
Yeah, I was in Utah hitting all the national parks and
That's
saw
awesome.
some of the spots where Westworld was shot. And
Love that
cool
show.
Stuff
I
like
haven't
that.
started the second season yet, but the first season was pretty good.
Yeah,
Pretty awesome.
yeah. So anyway, it was not a relaxing trip. There was a lot of things to do and see, but glad to be back. And OTAs are happening.
That's right.
So
That's
yeah,
right.
a lot going on.
A lot going
with the
on.
NFL owners meetings, and so we have a lot to talk about. And I know that we had some questions that came in over the weekend.
Yeah, we do. Okay, let's just jump right on into it. Jan in Allen, Texas. This is her question. Thank you, Jan. How much hitting in real football takes place during this week of OTAs? And what is the difference between OTAs and minicamps? Great question.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest differences is that OTAs, it's part of the voluntary portion of off-season workouts. So officially, it's voluntary, whereas minicamp, you're supposed to be there, and if you're not there, then you could be fined by the team and things like that. So, but it's phase 3 of the off-season program in the NFL. So the same rules apply across the board to all teams. So it doesn't look like real football in that they are wearing helmets, but they're not even wearing like shells. They're not wearing the football pants or pads. Shells are not the big shoulder pads, but the smaller ones. So those of us who are old enough to remember Dynasty, like Joan Collins and Linda Evans, know, smaller than that. But anyway, there's no contact.
Okay.
And, no hitting like that. And it's a little more than the underwear Olympics.
Yes.
Because
at the
you
combine.
do, you can do some things like some 7-on-7s and things like that, but you just can't hit each other.
Okay.
Because for example, in the earlier portions in phase 1 and phase 2 of the off-season program, as opposed to phase 3, which we're in now with OTAs. You can't even have a ball or a helmet out there. The only time you can have a ball is a quarterback throwing to a receiver, but a defensive back is not even allowed to cover them.
Gotcha.
So,
Then
yeah.
how long do OTAs happen? Is it
Well,
all
there
week?
are 3 sets of OTAs.
Okay.
And then minicamp will happen in June.
Minicamp will happen in
Yeah,
June.
and
that's when they'll be
Well,
in-
there still can't do contact and things like
Okay.
that, but it looks a little bit more like football.
Gotcha.
So it's really not going to be until the first weekend of training camp, which will be the last weekend of July when the Cowboys are out in Oxnard for the real training camp.
Right.
Not even until the third day in where they can, be full pads.
So they haven't been hitting each other.
No.
Any of these players?
They're
Ricky's
not
included,
allowed to. They're not allowed to.
December.
Those are violations. So,
Okay, so they don't hit from December through August. Well, end of July.
No, in fact, since Jan asked this question, I went through and thanks for this question, Jan, because it forced me to turn to the collective bargaining agreement, which is the big thing between the union and the NFL, between the players' union. And so Article 21 of the CBA, Collective Bargaining Agreement, which covers workouts. Let's see. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
The club may conduct a maximum of 3 days of OTAs. OTA stands for
On the field activity?
train. Yeah. Well,
Okay, sort of.
Okay. And so it's organized team activity. Organized team activity. So they don't even say practice.
Okay.
Okay, so the club may conduct a maximum of 3 days of OTAs during each of the first 2 weeks of phase 3. A maximum of 4 days can be conducted during the third or fourth week. Okay, so you can have 3. The first 2 of them are 3 days each. The third one can consist of 4 days. Okay. During phase 3, now that we're in OTAs, the coaches can actually be on the field with the players.
Okay.
Because up until this point with OTAs and with rookie camp last week, the coaches, only the strength and conditioning coaches were allowed to be out there to work with the players. Now, all of the position coaches, Kellen Moore, the new quarterbacks coach, can be out there with Dak and with Cooper Rush and with the rookie Mike White. before.
So before today, the only interaction that the coaches and the players can have is during their meetings. Is that correct?
Well, they weren't even having meetings.
They weren't even having meetings.
They weren't even having
Okay.
meetings,
Okay.
right. Okay, so coaches can be out there. No live contact is permitted. No one-on-one offense versus defense drills are permitted. So what that means is you won't see offensive linemen versus defensive linemen blocking each other, or, any kind of pass rush or anything like that. You won't see, you might see wide receivers going against defensive backs, but not any of the bumping kind of thing.
Okay.
No contact allowed. And there's no one-on-one special teams drills in terms of where they're trying to block each other going down the field. So, and the only special teams that you can do, you can work on kickoffs and punts and punt returns and kickoff returns and field goal and stuff like that, but you can't hit or make contact with each other.
Interesting.
So basically, it's kind of like a glorified walkthrough. So what's the purpose of OTAs? Well, for the young guys, it's like rookie minicamp. It gets them acclimated kind of to the pace of what you're going to do, and it's really more mental than it is physical, but it acclimates them to that, and you can start installing some plays and things like that. It's very basic stuff, but it's to gear up towards minicamp and ultimately training camp. And to give you an idea of what the schedule is, they do have meetings with the coaches, not only with Coach Garrett, a team meeting, but they have
position.
Yeah, with the coordinators and with their position coaches. Okay. So the weight room opens at 6:30 in the morning. The guys who are on special teams, and that would include all the young, if you're a first or a rookie or a first or second year guy who's a backup, you better play special teams. And special teams is kickoffs, punts, field
And a lot
goals.
of people, when they think special teams, they're probably really only thinking of Dan Bailey, Chris Jones, but they don't realize that all of those guys that are running behind them or running towards them are on the special teams.
Exactly. And even our Pro Bowl linemen like Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick and Zach Martin, they play special teams because they block on field goals and extra points. And Travis Frederick doesn't snap the ball back to, on the punts or field goal tries and things like that. That's LP Ladisar. That's a specialty thing, is being a deep snapper, but Travis plays the wing and he helps block on that. So a lot of players are involved in special teams. So OTAs, it's the same thing as regular season. The first meeting of the day is special teams. So good news for you, you get to be out there on special teams. The bad news is you have to be at meetings earlier than anybody else. The team meeting lasts only about 15 minutes. It starts at 8:15, and so then around 8:30 is when you have your meeting with your position coach, and then out on the field, and that goes for about 2 hours is the team meetings, and you're only on the field for about 2 hours, from 11 till about 12:45 or so. And so again, it's just like the regular season and everything else, mini camp and training camp. You spend more time in the playbook or in meetings than you do actually out on the field.
Interesting. Now, let me ask you this, Christy. Since there is no hitting during this, they're not really hitting each other until training camp. Is there anything that they do special to prepare their bodies for that? Because it's a shock to not have done it for almost, 6-7 months? It
is, and there are a lot of, I don't even want to say old school coaches, because that implies an age thing, or it's like, things, like get off my lawn, you young kid. But there are coaches and even some players who've been around a while who will tell you that since the current collective bargaining agreement in 2011, has that contributed to more injuries at the start of the season, because you don't have the same kind of contact. It's in same kind of work. It's more focused in the off season on conditioning and things like that. Then and then you go kind of from 0 to 100
real quick,
real quickly. Daryl Johnston and the guys. But I've only been covering training camp since 1991, so that's when it was Jimmy Johnson. But oh my gosh, when it got to the regular season, or even when it got to Sundays in the season, that was so much easier for those guys because Jimmy would just have them hammering each other.
Wow.
And the games were a relief, right? And now it's the opposite, where you're limited on the amount of contact practices you can have. Certainly the off season we just mentioned, but even within training camp. And then I think we've talked before on this podcast that once you get to the regular season, which is 17 weeks long, 16 games plus your bye weekend, you can only have 14 fully padded contact practices.
Right.
So yeah, it is a concern for a lot of people that say, look, it's not just that, but there are even some soft tissue injuries that seems like we have more of those at the beginning of the season than before. So I don't, So that, but the goal of the collective bargaining agreement was to give players a physical and a mental break, because otherwise they'd be in here 12 months a year pounding on each other. Some coaches would have them do more. And
that agreement includes their input, right?
Absolutely. The players union works hand in hand with the league, because you have to have two sides agree to the deal.
Very good.
So that was what they wanted. They wanted more off time, and they wanted lighter practices throughout the year, but especially in the off season, fewer requirements, weeks that they have to be here and the like.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jan, for that question. We'll move on to our next one. All right. This is from John in Huntington, Texas. Do players get paid for OTAs and off-season work, or is it part of their regular salary? Another great question.
We turn to Article 21 of the Collective Bargaining Agreement, Section 3, payment. The answer to the question, John, is yes, they do get paid for the voluntary work that they do in the off-season, and it's a daily amount, but it depends, and your amount depends whether you're a veteran player or a first-year player.
Does it depend on whether, even though it's voluntary, but does it depend on whether or not you show up?
Yes, you have to show up. So here it is. Each player shall receive at least the following amounts per day for any workouts or classroom instruction in which he participates, pursuant to a club's voluntary off-season workout program. Okay. So it is $215 per day.
Really?
Yes. So 3 days of OTAs and then a fourth day. I think they were out here doing some of the conditioning testing and stuff like that. So this week it would be 4 days at $215 each. But even earlier in the off-season workouts, before we get to OTAs, if there are 4 days a week that are available, you would have to do 3 out of the 4 days to get paid for that week.
Gotcha.
So, and then the other thing is room and board are covered if you have not set up a home in the area.
Okay, so for the rookies.
The rookies or some of the first-year players, who are trying to make the team, and maybe guys who have just signed. So room and board are covered just as they are out at Cowboys training camp when we're in California. Wow. And again, these are standardized throughout the league.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the agreement that the players union has with the league.
So when do they start making their regular salary?
You don't get a regular paycheck until the Tuesday of the first week of games.
Really?
Yes. So whatever your salary is, I believe that this year the rookie base is $490,000. Okay, so let's say that you're a rookie and you make the team and your base salary is the $490,000.
Take that.
Then, yes, divide that by 17, and that's your weekly paycheck.
Okay.
And you get it, I believe it's still on Tuesdays. I know it used to be, now everything's direct deposit, but I remember when players back at Valley Ranch days, I'm kind of going back a little bit of time now, but they'd literally have their paychecks.
Okay.
Yeah.
They go pick up, sign for it.
Now that's different. For example, Leighton Vander Esch and as the first round pick and the other rookies who got their signing bonuses. Now all 9 of our draft picks have been signed. Michael Gallup was signed on Monday. He was our third round pick, the receiver from Colorado State. And so once he got signed, then all of our draft picks are now in the fold under contract. And so when you get your signing bonus, then that's yours to keep. But for your base salary, no, the players don't get that until the regular season begins.
And so since it's for 17 weeks, I'm guessing you don't make the playoffs. That after that final game, that's your final check.
The playoffs is a different thing, and you get everyone, whether it's the wild card game or the divisional round or the conference championship game or the Super Bowl, it's different amounts. So you get extra money if you make the playoffs.
Okay.
And I believe it was $24,000 for the wild card entry. Division champions got $28,000 for each of the first 2 rounds.
I remember we talked about that. Yep.
So that's extra money.
That's extra. Very good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, John.
Yeah, that's a great
Huntington,
question.
Texas.
Yeah, and by the way, when you get to training camp, it's a little more than $215 a week, a day. You get paid by the week, but that's only for the veteran players and the first-year players. The rookies don't get. They get room and board, but not
After a weekly check.
Right, exactly.
I bet you that amount of money is like pocket change to those young fellows out there.
Well, but for the rookies and the first year guys, the ones who didn't get a huge signing bonus, like the top few draft
Van Der
picks.
Esch, yeah.
Hey, there are guys you'd be surprised. They don't have cars, right?
Right.
Or maybe they have cars back at home, but they flew in and, I mean, there are some guys. I remember there's one. I don't know if I should tell this story.
Tell it.
Okay, I'll tell it. Do you guys remember a safety that we had it was the early aughts? Yeah, it wasn't the late 1990s. I think it was the early aughts. Lynn Scott, he was a safety, an undrafted free agent, and he pretty much had the same suit that he wore on the charter for the first several games because he had one suit.
Yes.
So here are all these veterans and all these guys, super fly with all these like really great suits, and Lynn, kind of had the same one suit. I mean, it was kind of that kind of guy anyway, driving his pickup truck and small town Oklahoma guy, and he wasn't exactly a clothes horse, but they stay at the team hotel, right? Mm-hmm. They, since it's so close here at the Star, they don't have to bus. But when we were back at Valley Ranch, they stayed at a hotel there by DFW Airport.
Okay.
And so they literally would get on the little van to come over to Valley Ranch and practice, about 10-minute ride.
Yeah.
And that's where Tony Romo and Jason Witten first met. Jason Witten was a third-round pick, and Tony Romo was an undrafted rookie free agent. There they are, the class of 2003.
Wow.
And they're sitting near each other on the team bus, and that's where they first met, riding over to their first practice.
Wow.
Rookie camp
Speaking
with the Dallas
of
Cowboys.
Jason Witten and Tony Romo, I just forecast what you're looking at when you're looking at the team. What are you looking for? Because the team looks very different. There's no Tony Romo, no Dez, no Jason Witten, no Orlando Scandrick. Mm-hmm. It looks very different.
Yeah, the receiving core and the tight end position are vastly different with Dez gone, Witten gone. Terrence Williams, even before his legal stuff this past weekend, he had broken his foot in workouts, and so he wasn't going to be able to practice until later in the summer anyway. So, I'm real interested tomorrow with OTAs when the media is allowed to watch. Mm-hmm. Technically, we're not really supposed to watch, but you hang out by Nikki's desk and you get a great view of practice. But we shouldn't really talk about it today.
Take a picture of where I sit because we bring it up just about in every show, and I know Cowboys Nation is like, gosh, I want to see where she sits.
I know. Yes, actually, you could charge money to fans to just come sit at your desk, right?
Good idea.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, with our new receiving core, not just Michael Gallup, the third round pick, the rookie, but Alan Hearns, Deontay Thompson, Tavon Austin, who was acquired in the trade with the Rams. How are they going to use him? Mm-hmm. Let's see, Connor Williams along the offensive line. It looks like they're going to keep Lyle Collins at right tackle and give Williams a chance, the rookie, at left guard. And then obviously at tight end, Jeff Swaim is the incumbent starter, right? Mm-hmm. He's the incumbent veteran coming back. And so he's gone from third team to first team with the retirement of Jason Witten and James Hanna. Mm-hmm. So Blake Jarwin, who was a rookie last year and spent most of the season on the practice squad, get to see him. And then get to see Dalton Schultz work in. So, yeah. And then Leighton Vander Esch, I think probably working second team this week, but it'll be interesting to see if he gets some work with the first team at middle linebacker.
Very good. Very good. All righty. Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned that the owners have their owners meetings.
Right.
And you wanted to touch on a couple things that they are discussing and trying to work through out there.
Yeah, well, they're taking place in Atlanta, and there's more than one owners meeting in the off season. So these are the spring meetings, and it happens to take place in Atlanta this year, the spring meetings. And so earlier today, the owners approved the sale of the Carolina Panthers from Jerry Richardson to David Tepper.
Okay.
He's a hedge fund manager, a billionaire. He's been a minority. He's a Pittsburgh guy. He's a native of Pittsburgh, and he was a minority owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Owns 5% of that team. But so he had been vetted and everything.
Yes.
You know,
Will he have
before
to give
owning
that up?
I believe he will.
Okay.
So because he's now the owner of the. Actually, I think the official transfer will take place next month or later this summer. But last I saw, the purchase price was going to be $2.2 billion.
Wow.
Yes. So that's taken place. And then the other thing is the NFL draft, which we just had in Arlington. And before that was in Philadelphia for 2017. And before that for a couple years was in Chicago. And before that for so many years was in New York. That's being treated now like the Super Bowl in that cities are putting in bids for it, just like Arlington and the Cowboys did to host it. I think it's great. And so Nashville is probably going to be approved this week to host it for next year. So they're
Okay.
So all of the cities are kind of lining up. And what's cool about the NFL draft is kind of like the Super Bowl. It doesn't have to be in a place where there's a big stadium that seats 60 or 90,000 people. In our case, 100,000, in a place where the NFL actually has games. There are thoughts that eventually it could be in a place like Canton, Ohio, which is the location of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
For sure.
Yeah. And so they can move it around and things
That's
like
nice.
that. And
I
I think Nashville would have a great vibe.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, my gosh.
And it just gives people an opportunity that may ordinarily not have the opportunity to go and experience that.
Yeah, and the thing about
like
a place like Nashville is it's a pretty short drive. It's 4 or 5 hours from several teams, not just the Carolina Panthers that would be in their backyard. I'm sorry, the Tennessee Titans that would be in their backyard, but short drives even for, like Cincinnati Bengals.
Absolutely.
And
Kansas
things like
City.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. One more question. Well, not one more, but we haven't had a show since DCC Finals.
Oh, my gosh.
We haven't got a chance to talk about that experience. It looked really awesome.
It was awesome. The solo routines this year were amazing. The finals are a two-part process. In the morning, we had 82 finalists this year.
Okay.
We had to cut it to 45 invitations to training camp.
Oh, that's a lot.
And 2.5 months of training camp. It starts the first week of June.
Yes.
And then our first home preseason game is mid-August.
Right.
So between then, start of cheerleader summer training camp and that first preseason game, there are going to be 9 girls that are cut from the team because the final squad is usually 36 members. But the morning session is the solo routines. The afternoon is the girls are on the field at the 50-yard line, come out in groups of 5 and do the dance combo, followed by the kick line. And we as judges are sitting up at the 200 level at the 50-yard line, and we're watching the girls on the big screen.
Okay.
And at 60 yards wide and over 7 stories tall, let's just say that high-definition digital screen is so unforgiving.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
Oh, I wouldn't want to be on it.
But here's why we do that, and that's because the people who are at the games on game day,
that's what they're looking at.
The people who are, unless you're right there in the lower seating bowl, you're 200 or up, and you can't really see the girls up close. You're watching them on the screen, and so that's why we do that in the afternoon session. But the solos, shout out to Gina, who has won she's from San Diego. She's won a national dance competition, and she did this lyrical routine to Whitney Houston's I Have Nothing.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. And then
that song alone will give you, it gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
You know?
And then in fact, you can go to my Twitter account at Christy Cowboy and go back to the final round, which was 2 Fridays ago, and I think I posted a couple of videos there. But Maddie is the one who stole the show. She did a Justin Timberlake "Rock Your Body."
Yeah.
Fantastic. She stole the show. This hip hop thing. Lacey went first. Kashera went last. Savannah was terrific. Tess, Christina. I shouldn't name names because I'll,
You're very good
I don't
at
want
it.
to
My
ignore. I
goodness.
don't want to ignore Heather O because she was fantastic
Yes.
too. So don't name names because you'll, miss somebody. And they were all great.
Awesome.
But the judges' deliberations were a little over 2.5 hours.
I know that's difficult to come to an agreement on all of these young ladies. That has to 2.5 hours. I'm surprised that's not really that long. I'm surprised it wasn't longer.
Well, some of the girls are not. A few are unanimous choices. There were
Okay.
15 judges this year. A few of them are, like 13 yeses and 2 maybes. So, you don't have to stop down for
Gotcha.
every one of them. But others, you'd be surprised how split the votes are. And I always say this, and it's really true this year, that of the 82 candidates, we could literally have 2 squads
Yeah.
of 36 girls because they're all that
They're that
talented and beautiful and smart, very impressive in panel interviews,
Yeah.
great scores on the written test, 100-question written test. And so it's really tough. We had 23 returning veterans re-audition this year just because you were on the squad last year.
That's right.
You don't automatically make it back. You have to come back and compete in finals this year to be be invited to training camp. So we had 23 returning veterans, and 2 did not make it back to training camp. And
Wow.
because CMT show, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleader Making the Team, it's going to be season 13 this year.
That's hard
and
to believe.
they like to kind of keep the drama, and so I'm not going to name names
Okay.
of who did not make it
Right.
back. Because I think CMT would frown upon that. But it was really tough, and that's
Yeah.
when it's hard in the judges' room, especially when you have a relationship with
Of
the girls. When
course.
you're the sideline reporter and you're down there with them, you have a relationship and doing interviews with them for different stories or whatever. So
sure,
that's
for
really
sure.
tough.
Wow.
But I'm really excited about the incoming rookie class, the candidates who were invited to training camp. There are some amazingly talented, smart young women, and all 45 certainly deserve to be there. And I don't look forward to the training camp because Kelly Finglass, the director, and Judy Trammell, the choreographer, are going to have some tough decisions to
Is
make
it
this
just
summer.
them 2 that are making that decision?
Well, yeah, they have the ultimate say. Yes,
Got
they rehearse 5 nights a week, about 2.5, at least 3 hours a night. At least 2.5, usually 3.5 hours a night.
Gotcha.
And some of the girls don't have as much of a dance training background, and you're learning maybe 3 new routines a night. And so sometimes they can't keep up with the choreography. But that used to happen more often. Now these girls are so skilled and have such backgrounds in drill team or in dance that, it gets harder and harder every year.
Wow.
I've always said that it's harder to make the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders than it is to make
You
the
have
Dallas
said
Cowboys
that.
football
That's
team.
right. Well,
Oh, we're almost out of
we're
time.
almost time, but before we go, we do have to mention our book, The 12 Mighty Orphans by Jim Dent, our first book for the 5 Points Blue Book Club. And I talked about it a little bit last week with Taylor Stern. And the reason we want to bring it up today is because of the event that we talked about, Cowboys U, and what is going to be given to those young boys.
I was so glad that having Taylor on last week that you guys talked about Cowboys U and about the book club with Rod Marinelli. And so actually I'll give credit to Whitney Brandon Faulkner in our community relations department with the Cowboys. When we came up with the concept of having Rod Marinelli start his book club for 5 Points Blue, and this being the very first book, Whitney said, you know what, that would be great. I'm going to see about buying that book and making it available to each of the young high school players that comes in for Cowboys U.
That's so awesome.
At the end of OTA. So 2 weeks from now, when it's the final day of OTAs, and the current Cowboy players are acting as coaches in a flag football tournament for these high school kids that come in, Rod Marinelli is going to address those high school kids during the life skills session,
Which is
Cowboys U, after they play their flag football tournament.
which you couldn't pay enough money for that experience.
Yeah, Coach Garrett asked not just the team captains, but other guys on the team that just have really, remarkable stories of things that they have overcome in their past. And
Absolutely.
it's very inspiring. But anyway, Coach Garrett is making time this year to have Rod Marinelli come in and talk to those high school players. And each of those kids is going to get a copy of that book. And it's funded by the Gene and Jerry Jones Family Charities. So thank you for buying the book for each of those kids. And inside each of those books, there's going to be a postcard, and it's going to be addressed to Rod Marinelli, to his office here at the Star. And those football players are going to be invited to read the book and then send a note to Coach afterwards, just saying, hey, something that they took away from the book, kind of thing. So thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Gene and Jerry Jones Family Charities.
Fabulous.
And great story. And we're going to have Coach in once the OTAs and everything get kind of wrapped up. We'll conclude with 12 Mighty Orphans, and hopefully everyone's getting up to speed on that. And then we'll start our next book that's about Teddy Roosevelt saving football. And
the Big Scrum?
How Teddy Roosevelt saved football, and it's from the early 1900s.
All right.
Yeah. The book was written recently, but it talks about Teddy Roosevelt saving the game.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Can't
really
wait to
neat.
read
I can't believe our time went so quickly. Next week,
that.
kickoff rule changes are being considered by league owners, and so we'll have a lot to talk with that coming up.
Very good. Well, thank you for watching today, and we'll see you next week right here on 5 Points Blue.
This has been a production of 5 Points Blue, DallasCowboys.com, and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!